So today we have an absolute banger of a video. I have never seen this topic explained this way or understood in this way, despite being such a massive aspect to people's success, right? I've been obsessed over the past 3 years, especially since starting coaches, with these statistics right here. Put simply, why are a majority of people not disciplined? Everyone in these categories are capable of achieving their New Year's goals, of capable of getting a job they like eventually after a good amount of work, right? And are capable of being in shape, of course. Now, the mainstream consensus is that just these people are undisciplined. And that's true to a sense, but discipline, as most people know it, as the mainstream knows it, is just our ability to choose long-term gratification over the instant comfort in the moment, right? So it's our ability to have long-term thinking. Now, I thought this was true, but then you look at smart people. A lot of smart people are out of shape, fail their New Year's goals, dislike their job. A lot of smart people with long-term thinking still end up in these categories. And how is that possible, right? These long-term thinkers still ending up here. I'm going to explain how it's possible. It's because of this right here. So in order to really wrap my mind around this, because I could just never let it go until I found an explainable solution, right? An explainable reason, you have the pain pleasure principle. Now, what this is the idea and the fact that humans act to minimize pain and maximize relief or pleasure as perceived by the nervous system in the present moment, right? And I scanned every situation. I scanned all my past experiences, all my clients' experiences. And I said, is there any situation where this isn't true? Never, right? This is always true. Now, then you could ask, how would anyone ever do hard things if we always try to minimize pain, right? Because take a look at this here. Anything that gives you delayed pleasure, delayed fulfillment or achievement always takes immediate effort, right? Usually physical pain in the present moment. Say you do exercise, cold plunge, meditation, hard work, quitting vices. That all takes effort in the moment, but you get delayed pleasure, right? And then you have scrolling, junk food, drug abuse, laziness, porn, anything that gives you an instant, easy dopamine spike usually leads to suffering. For example, you have junk food, you eat enough of it, you have worse health, you have worse energy, worse confidence, right? It's delayed suffering. Now, most people know this, right? You could logically say, okay, I know this is true. Now, how do I actually do these things? Because I can never stay consistent with them, even though I want to be doing them. And it would seem by the pain pleasure principle on the surface that everyone would always choose these. But in reality, there's a lot of people who end up living their lives like this, right? How is that possible? It is possible because disciplined people do not avoid dopamine, the instant gratification, because it causes long-term pain. They avoid it because it causes immediate and internal friction to their identity. It causes immediate pain. Now, what we're doing here is we're inserting psychological pain. And so what I finally understood is that this pain pleasure principle is acting even when we do the effortful activity, right? People who seek effort and are accustomed to it have an identity, have standards, and have an environment where it causes them more relief to do that thing than to sit on the couch in the moment. When they make the decision to go to the gym, they get more pleasure from that than sitting on the couch. Whereas an undisciplined person gets more pleasure from sitting on the couch than going to the gym because they don't have that psychological standard, right? Now I'm going to explain this a little more deeply here. I'm going to use myself for example. So this is me in, I believe, 2021 versus 2025 now, right? I was going to the gym a little bit here. I didn't really have any standards at all, no written standards. And I reflect on my mindset then, even though I didn't think a lot. I was just driven by moving away from pain, right? The pain pleasure principle without any standards ends up being this. Now I have good genetics, so I was still healthy, but I was smoking weed every day, drinking every day, had no discipline with any habits. And if I kept going down the path I was going here, I would not look like this today. I would be very deep into addiction and deeply depressed. Now, me today, I have standards for myself. When I say standards, I'll go ahead and throw the definition in right now. Standards are the internal rules, values, and benchmarks that guide behavior, choices, and self-expectations, defining what you consider acceptable or unacceptable, right? Those are your standards. They're going on internally. You can't really see them until you write them down. It's what makes you feel aligned, right? When you are following your standards, you feel aligned. Now, going back up here, right? This guy, his standards were these. He had them written down, right? Wake up at first alarm, do his cardio, track the macros, train to failure, nighttime routine. These were things to where if I didn't do them, I felt psychological pain. And so I was driven away from that psychological pain and more towards the slight pain of getting them done, right? Because all these things can be uncomfortable, different types of uncomfortable. In addition, my identity was this. Identity meaning what I thought of myself, who I told myself I was, right? I was someone who sticks to my word and does not settle for average. Now, I didn't really know my identity here, but what it was now reflecting is how I feel right now matters more than what I said I would do. And so if I didn't stick to my word, I would not get any of that psychological pain, right? Let's look at this here, right? So if I skip the gym, this guy here, we're talking about the blue guy, I get immediate internal friction, immediate tension, and the urge to correct. And so I have two factors here. I have the effort it takes to get to the gym and the internal pain of skipping the gym. And when I say internal pain, I mean internal pain of not meeting my standard, right? Because if we don't meet our standard, it is uncomfortable and painful. Now, if this guy skips the gym up here, what I get because I don't have a standard is I get immediate relief, right? I don't have to do the exercise. I can relax. I can get the physical comfort, right? Comfort in the moment. And then I don't have any urgency to correct. I don't have the identity and standard that makes me feel like I'm doing anything wrong, right? And so the effort to get to the gym and the pain that's going to be required to do the workouts is heavier than the internal pain of skipping by a mile, right? In summary, avoidance of what I'm supposed to do equals relief for this guy, and alignment equals relief for this guy. Now, when you look at these two things, you would say this guy's more disciplined than this guy, but in reality, they're both running from pain and pursuing pleasure. This guy just has more pain when he's not aligned with his actions. Not in the future, but in the moment, right? Same nervous system response, same pain pleasure principle. So discipline, what it really is a nervous system where alignment produces less pain than avoidance, right? Alignment equals acting in accordance with your standards and identity. That's what it feels to be aligned. Now, a lot of people aren't 100% aware what alignment is for them because they haven't created their standards and identity. They're kind of just going on primal survival mode. So that's step one. That's not the purpose of this video. The purpose of this video is to show when you have those desired outcomes and those desired goals that require those desired inputs, being able to create an environment, identity, and standard where those things become automatic, right? They become the first choice. Now, I want you guys to look at here. So, the disciplined man, right? When doing a productive task, and we're going to assume the productive task is difficult and the unproductive task is easy. The disciplined man reduces friction when doing the productive task. So, for example, if you have the task and you have this much friction, say, let's use going to the gym because we already use it. Going to the gym, right? This much friction to go in the gym. Still, there's going to be physical uncomfort. Maybe he's a little tired. Maybe he's a little sore. So there's a friction there. However, because of his standard and identity, the satisfaction of going to the gym, getting the pump, proving himself he is the man who say he is, the confidence boost, the reinforcement that he's going to have a good physique, the satisfaction outweighs the friction, so he's going to do it. Now, the unproductive task, right? Let's say skipping the gym and watching the football game. The friction separating him from watching the game instead of going to the gym becomes his standard. When your standard is violated, you feel pain. And so that's the friction separating him from doing that task. The friction of watching the football game and skipping the gym is high because that would not align with his identity and that will not align with his standard, creating a lot of psychological pain, more pain than it would take to go to the gym. Now, the satisfaction from sitting on the couch and watching football wouldn't be that high either. He's like, I should be going to the gym right now. I don't feel at peace. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing. That would be the underlying tone. This is what a disciplined man feels. Now, on the other hand, we have the undisciplined individual, right? The friction for them going to the gym is high. What they're thinking about all the pain, the drive to the gym, if people are going to judge them, if they're not doing the workout right? All of this is between them going to the gym. Now, for the undisciplined individual, or an individual whose nervous system where alignment produces more pain than avoidance, right? Their friction for going to the gym is going to be high. They're thinking about all the pain of going to the gym, far away their goals are, how long they've been going to the gym without seeing that many results, right? This is what an undisciplined person feels when going to the gym. They feel a lot of friction before going to the gym. The satisfaction they get usually ends up also being pretty close to the disciplined person, right? Because you get all these endorphin boosts, you get the fact that you're working towards your body, right? And you're starting to create the identity that you are a disciplined person, but you haven't yet created that identity and that standard yet. Now, to do the unproductive thing, right? Watch the sports game. There's not a lot of friction. And this is a huge one, guys. If there's no standard, if there's no discomfort, if you don't stick to your word and don't stick to your goals, the friction is low, right? This list right here created friction, and this identity, I stick to my word and do not settle for average, created the friction. Because I have this, the psychological discomfort I feel when I do not stick to that identity pushes me so far away from watching the game instead of going to the gym, right? Now, the satisfaction someone gets from watching that Bears game is going to be super high because they don't feel unaligned while they're doing it, right? They don't feel bad for not going to the gym, right? And they're just enjoying that comfort. And so it makes it impossible if you have an undisciplined nervous system, an undisciplined standard and identity to go to the gym. Because remember, the pain pleasure principle, minimize pain and maximize relief. If the satisfaction is higher than the friction, right? You're always going to choose the satisfaction. You're always going to choose the pleasure. So I hope I was able to help you guys conceptualize this with this. But now let's get into what we actually do. So first things first, and this is going to be the biggest one, is going to be your standards, right? The standards, I'll repeat it again because it's that important. The internal rules, values, and benchmarks that guide behavior, choices, and self-expectations, defining what you consider acceptable or unacceptable, right? A standard only exists if breaking it creates an immediate internal cost. That is what a standard is. If you commit an action or even a thought that goes against these things and it doesn't create an internal cost or internal pain, you don't have that standard, right? But if you have a standard that says, hey, I go to the gym X days a week and you break it and you feel internal pain, that is a standard, right? Now, it is like you can conceptualize this and say, okay, how do I raise my standard? Well, I'll show you how here. Number one is going to be non-negotiables. Non-negotiables are certain tasks, actions, behaviors that are non-negotiable, are not optional to miss, right? And the reason they need to be non-negotiable is because if they're negotiable, you will negotiate your way out of this, right? If they're negotiable and you get that internal pain of not sticking to the negotiable tasks, you'll take the easiest way out, which say, oh, it's okay. I was supposed to do this anyways. I wasn't feeling like going to the gym. But when it becomes a non-negotiable, you can't negotiate your way out of that, right? And so it has to be a non-negotiable. And what I do for all my clients, and I have a list for myself too, is you create a list of things, right? You don't have to start with as many as this, but you pick a certain number of needle moving things and habits that move towards your goals. Say if it's to get in shape, you have the 200 calories of zone 2 cardio, right? The stretching. Say if it's to improve confidence and mental clarity, you have power presence practice, wake up before 9:30, improve willpower, you have cold shower, all these things. This can go on and on, right? But when you put these on a list and say, I am going to do these things and put a lot of importance mentally on that, and then you don't do them, that creates pain. Now, when you have this pain and when you've experienced this pain and then you're deciding whether, hey, I'm either going to skip the task or do the task, your nervous system goes, oh, wait, it's more painful for me to skip the task. Now, that's why they have to be written down. And for example, when that identity and that standard is ingrained, as you could see, won the day, this is actually from the same guy right here, all these things were won. So he did every single one of these things every single day this month. This is December. That's because his nervous system is running on autopilot. His nervous system knows if I do these things, I am going to feel better in the moment than if I don't, right? Psychologically. In addition is going to be a Google Calendar. Again, the goal with this is to create a crystal clear identity and standard for yourself that, if broken, creates pain. And the reason it needs to be crystal clear is because if it's not, you will unconsciously lower your standard because that is comfortable, right? If you are not meeting your standard, you have two options to relieve the pain. You can either do the things that get you back to your standard, or you can lower your standard, right? And a lot of times the easier thing is going to be to lower that standard, unless we create more pain by lowering the standard, more internal discomfort. And you do this by getting crystal clear with these systems. I use Google Calendar here. I've been doing this for a while, so I have a certain system for myself that I feel like works best for me. Like I put tasks for my little habits, my Instagram stories. I have a certain time where I only work on long form. In the evening, I leave a bit more open space for some to-do lists or client calls or whatever it may be. And I like going to the gym around this time, right? Now, when I stick to this, I get the pleasure and the positive reinforcement of sticking this. So it feels good in the moment, even though there's a slight amount of pain if I don't want to do the YouTube video or I don't want to do the reels or the gym. But the pleasure of completing it always outweighs the pain in the moment. Next, we have environment. This cannot be overstated. And I always knew environment was really important just by reflecting on my life when I had a positive environment and reflecting on it when it was negative or not conducive to my growth. I was like, why does it affect me so much? And the reason it affects you is because your environment creates your standard, right? When you have an environment with friends and community who support what you're trying to achieve, you admire them and their goals and their standards, they celebrate your success, you enjoy their presence, they hold you accountable, right? The pain of not being aligned gets so much stronger when friends and community are involved. Now, however, if your friends and community are the type of environment that don't support what you're doing, right, that have lower standards to you, the alignment is going to feel more difficult because the alignment will almost feel awkward. Right? If you're doing all these things, your friends are kind of, slightly resenting you, even though they're not saying it, drifting from them a little bit, that feels awkward. Avoidance of your standards will feel normal. And so you want to have an environment where alignment towards your goals feels normal and avoidance feels awkward, right? Friends and community, guys, if you have friends you feel like are dragging you down despite giving them a chance to come with you on your journey, to raise your standard, to grow together, if you've given them that chance and they haven't accepted it, there's nothing else you can do. You will do no benefit by lowering yourself to their level. And that's inevitably what will happen if you stay in that community, in that friendship, right? Communities, great communities, martial arts, gyms end up being communities, online communities, the Evolve Method Tribe, we meet every Sunday. It's absolutely phenomenal. We're always fired up for our goals after it. Schools can be communities. Whatever you're interested, try to find a community where you guys support each other's goals and you have a collective standard to push for them, because it causes so much more pleasure and satisfaction when you're moving towards a goal and your friends and community support it, right? Something about our biology just really, really loves that. In addition, a lot simpler is going to be physical space, right? If you work from home or even at an office, are there temptations everywhere? Are you causing yourself more friction to do the productive tasks, right? You want to lower the amount of friction here as much as possible with your environment and increase the satisfaction as much as possible with doing the productive task. Next is going to be digital environment. This is huge, especially in 2025, with a lot of people spending, 3+ hours on their phones, whether that's social media or texting or whatever, right? Is the content I consumed aligned with the standard I have and desire, right? Whatever you are consuming on a daily basis becomes your identity, becomes your standard, filters your thoughts, right? And the problem with this is because it's so repetitive and unconscious and it's hard to see, it can easily taint these things without us even knowing, right? Now, the nice thing is once you set a clear standard for yourself of what you're going for and what the actions you want to be taking, right? The life you want to be living, your algorithm usually ends up conforming with that. Like when I started bodybuilding stuff just showed up everywhere. When I was doing MMA, it was MMA stuff, and I'm focused on marketing, etc. Now, when I was this kid right here, it was all brain rot entertainment because you get the biggest dopamine hit from mindless entertainment. That's usually what you get the biggest dopamine hit from. In addition, when your emotions are going this way and that way, and you're releasing endorphins for sadness and endorphins for happiness and all of the above, getting so many emotion switches, and it's just a mumbo jumbo of brain chemistry, that ends up being extremely addictive, extremely comfortable in the moment, which makes it a very enticing action for the pain pleasure principle. Now, the best way to avoid this is delete the apps, right? If you do not need Instagram, if you do not need, TikTok, there's no need to have them. Even if your content is supporting bodybuilding, etc., that stuff still usually ends up being brain rot. You don't choose what you scroll. You don't choose what you see. The algorithm chooses whatever can get your emotion, whichever can grab your emotions and throw them around your brain as much as possible so you'll stay. It's not about overall value and what you get out of it. It's what can capture your attention best, which usually is not inducive for our growth and learning. If you want to relax a little, watch a movie. That's actually relaxing versus scrolling social media. Next is going to be massive. This is going to be self-talk. Guys, this is so real. Now, these were more concrete things you could do. This is going to be more internal, and you're going to pay a lot more attention to them. The self-talk you tell yourselves literally determines how much pleasure versus how much friction and pain you experience. If you are telling yourself when you are doing cardio on the Stairmaster or the incline or going on a run or whatever, if you're saying, I get to do this, right? You will experience so much pleasure versus if you feel like I have to do this as an obligation. I'm only doing this as a means to an end, because as you guys know, that end, we don't think about it. We just think about the means in the moment. Is it pleasurable or not, right? And it becomes pleasurable when you change it from I get to versus I have to, right? And you also change it from I will feel great after versus this is going to suck. So you should think about the outcome, right? The physique you're going to get, the energy you're going to feel, the hormones that are going to release in your body. But what thinking about that doesn't make you say, hey, because I know logically I'm going to get this in the future, I'm going to endure more pain now. No, it creates more pleasure in the moment to get you to keep doing the thing. In addition, this is a simple thing, which is if you're struggling with procrastination, this is huge. For a lot of time we procrastinate because we imagine the task being a lot harder than it is, when in reality, doing that task is what's going to relieve all the pain, right? We just don't feel like that in the moment. Again, even though we know it will, logically, doesn't feel like that. And so tell yourself, right, if you're going to the gym, instead of I'm going to go work out for an hour and you're imagining going to the gym, driving, doing the sets, feeling tired, feeling sore, just imagine, say, I'm going to put my shoes on. And then you get yourself in motion and then does it feel as bad anymore and you get moving, right? That's a tool you can use as well. Last, but most definitely not least, is going to be how you perceive pain, how you perceive discomfort. If you perceive discomfort as a positive thing, you will run laps around the person who perceives discomfort as bad. Because when you perceive discomfort as good, as progress, you get that immediate positive feedback, that immediate pleasure that allows you to push towards discomfort. Versus someone who wishes things were easier, they have the difficult and discomfortable action on top of the psychological discomfort of not thinking like they're supposed to be here, not thinking that this is actually good for them, right? And so I repeatedly tell myself, even when I feel the worst, right, I kind of tell myself, as long as I'm doing aligned actions and pushing myself towards the right goals, I tell myself the more discomfort I feel, the more the growth. And that's why I would always run laps around a person who thinks like this. And in reality, guys, everyone who is in this category thinks like this. If you just have that one mental switch of seeing discomfort as growth, as a positive thing, all the actions that would take you from going from overweight to in shape will become more pleasurable in the moment, right? In the moment, you'd be giving yourself so much more positive feedback. Your identity becomes, I'm someone who does uncomfortable things and sticks to my word, versus how I do what I feel now. And going against that identity and that standard and that desire from growth ends up being so much more painful than what it actually takes, guys, right? And so that's the self-talk aspect. Now, what this all leads into overall is identity, right? Now, this isn't an identity video, but in summary, identity includes all of these things, right? How you relate yourself to others, the standards and values you have for yourself, and the thoughts going inside your mind. And so if you can optimize all of these to where the psychological pain of avoiding the uncomfortable action is heavier than the physical and mental pain of doing the aligned action, right? If you can do that, you become disciplined. Right. And that's what all disciplined people do. It's not that disciplined people just have more willpower than you, right? Or more motivation, because motivation fades. When you feel motivation, it makes effort feel lighter. So the effort feel less painful for a moment. But when the motivation fades, the scale tips again. Right? What motivation does is it relieves this effort. It brings this effort up here. But then if you don't change your identity or your standards, the internal pain of skipping ends up being less painful than the pain of effort. This is my first time explaining this. I'm definitely going to talk about this more and more because I have done extensive research and I really haven't found this explained in a good way. And what this has also done is it's created a lot of empathy for me, because us as humans, we almost can't help it, right? We act unconsciously based on these things, right? We unconsciously automatically think what minimizes pain and what maximizes relief, and not unconsciously think it. We feel it, and when we just act, right? And so for me, all my daily habits, they end up being more pleasurable than the pain of not doing them, right? And that's what you got to create for yourself. You have to set up your identity, standard, environment, and thoughts, and create that for yourself, because pain is just simply not something we can avoid. We are going to suffer. It is inevitable, and we need to make sure our suffering is in service of our goals. That's it, right? How can you create an environment where your suffering, your pain is always in service of your goals? Because if it's not, that means your life will be suffering because you don't achieve your goals, and you end up out of shape, lonely, working a job you hate, and unconfident. And that's so much more suffering than these things right here. The problem is we don't feel it right away. We feel it in the future. And so you need to take that future pain and somehow learn how to move it to the present if you don't do these things, if you don't live an aligned life. Make sense, guys? If you guys need help creating a nervous system where alignment produces less pain than avoidance, I cannot emphasize enough getting a coach. Every successful person I know has a coach. I have two. Those coaches have coaches. Those coaches have coaches. Because successful people know the environment, accountability, someone who's going to help you create the best standard for yourself that's going to get you to your goals and make those non-negotiables, right, and help you keep your word, is just invaluable. I will probably never go my life again without some sort of coach, because they help create the standard and the environment, and the standards and the environment create your actions, and your actions create your life. And so if you guys want a brother alongside you on this journey of achieving your best self mentally, physically, sexually, and spiritually, go ahead, book a call with me. I'll put it in the description and the bio. But otherwise, brothers, put this to use. I'm rooting for you. You guys are all capable of the life you want. You just have to create a nervous system where alignment produces less pain than avoidance. And now you guys know how. With love, brothers. Peace.